There is a scene near the end of Regular Show, Season 8, Episode 27, where two best friends stand in a park they have known for almost a decade. One of them is about to fly into the sun. Not metaphorically, not as a joke, literally into the sun, to save a universe that has been ending and restarting for 14 billion years. And what the other one does, the Blue Jay who has spent 8 seasons learning how to grow up, is nothing. He watches. He lets it happen. Because by that point, the show has already taught you that the hardest part of loving someone is knowing when to let go. The show never says that out loud. It does not need to. It has been saying it quietly in 100 different ways since September 6th, 2010. That is the entire story of Mordecai and Rigby, not the adventures, not the chaos, the letting go. And to understand how this show earns that ending, you have to go back to the very beginning. You have to trace the line from 2 slackers on a couch to 2 men standing in the place where they became who they were always supposed to be. That line is longer than you think, and stranger, and more carefully drawn than almost anyone gives this show credit for. Before we go further, a quick note. If you enjoy long-form essays like this one, subscribing helps the channel keep going. It is free and takes about 3 seconds. Now, back to it. On September 6th, 2010, Cartoon Network aired a show about 2 friends who worked at a park and did not want to do their jobs. That was the pitch, essentially. 2 23-year-old groundskeepers, a blue jay named Mordecai and a raccoon named Rigby, employed at a public park under the management of a sentient gumball machine named Benson, alongside a cast of characters that included an immortal yeti named Skips, a lollipop man named Pops, a green overweight man named Muscle Man, and a ghost named High Five Ghost. The first episode was called The Power. It was 11 minutes long. It was about a magic keyboard. The premiere pulled in 2.097 million viewers, which for a Monday night cartoon about talking animals was more than anyone expected. What happened in those 11 minutes tells you more about Mordecai and Rigby than almost any episode that followed. While pretending to be professional wrestlers in their shared bedroom, Rigby curled himself into a ball and Mordecai bounced him off their trampoline, launching him directly into the wall and punching a hole through it. That hole, that completely avoidable, self-inflicted piece of property damage, became the engine for the entire episode. They needed money to fix it. They did not want to earn the money. So they stole a magical keyboard from a wizard who was urinating in a bush, named it the Power, and used it to manipulate their boss into giving them a raise. They used it on Pops first, testing its ability, and Pops gave them butterscotch ripple lollipops for their performance. Seeing that it worked, they pointed it at Benson, who immediately agreed to a $20 raise for each of them. It worked briefly, then it did not. Then things escalated into something genuinely surreal, as they always would on this show. They accidentally sent Skips to the moon, not to the other side of the park, not to the next town, to the moon. Benson confiscated the keyboard and gave it to Skips, who broke it in half. And Mordecai and Rigby were right back where they started. 2 guys who broke something and had to figure out how to fix it, while causing exponentially more damage along the way. That is every episode of Regular Show. That is the formula, distilled into its purest form. 2 friends make a small mistake. The mistake spirals into something cosmic. The universe warps around the mistake, like fabric around a stone. They survive. They learn almost nothing, and then they do it again the next week, for 244 episodes, for 7 years, until the formula itself becomes something more than a formula, until it becomes a language for talking about friendship and growing up, and the terrifying distance between who you are and who you could have been. But here's the thing about formulas. If you run them long enough, something starts to change beneath the surface. The characters stop being placeholders for the premise and start becoming people, or in this case, a bird and a raccoon who feel more human than most characters in live-action television. Over those 244 episodes, across 8 seasons, from September 6th, 2010 to January 16th, 2017, Mordecai and Rigby grew up. Not quickly, not neatly, not the way a prestige drama would handle it, with clear turning points and dramatic monologues. They grew up the way most of us do, slowly, reluctantly, and with a lot of denial in between. They grew up the way you do when you are not paying attention, when the changes are so small that you only notice them when you look back years later and realize you're not the same person who started. To understand that story, you need to understand where these characters came from, not just as animated figures on a screen, but as ideas that lived in someone's head before they ever had names. Before regular show existed, before Cartoon Network greenlit it, before Mordecai was a blue jay or Rigby was a raccoon, there was a short film. In 2006, a student at the California Institute of the Arts named J.G. Quintel made a 7-minute animated film called 2 in the AM PM. It was a class exercise. The students pulled random titles from a hat and had 48 hours to produce a film based on whatever they drew. Quintel drew the title, went back to his desk, and in a marathon session, alongside about 20 fellow students, including Sam Marin, created a short about 2 convenience store clerks working a late-night shift who accidentally ingested something that made the world fold into something hallucinogenic and strange. One of those clerks, voiced by Quintel himself, would eventually become Mordecai. The other, voiced by Sam Marin, would become the prototype for Benson, not Rigby. Rigby did not exist yet. That is worth sitting with for a moment. The most important friendship in the show, the relationship that would anchor 244 episodes and 7 years of television, did not exist in the original conception. Mordecai existed. The tone existed. The sense that ordinary life could tip into the surreal without warning, that boredom could contain portals to the cosmic. That was all there. But the specific alchemy of Mordecai and Rigby, the codependent, competitive, deeply loving dynamic that would define the show, had not been invented yet. What Quintel found in that short film was the atmosphere. What he added when he developed the concept into a full series for Cartoon Network was the relationship. And that addition changed everything. Because 2 in the AM PM is interesting as a student film, a snapshot of a specific creative sensibility. But regular show is something else entirely. Regular show is about what happens when you take that creative sensibility and filter it through the lens of a friendship so deep that it bends the world around it. Mordecai and Rigby were not just co-workers. They were not just roommates. Even though they shared a bedroom in a house owned by their employer, they were best friends in the way that only people who met as children can be best friends. The show established early, across the first season's 12 episodes, that the two had known each other since kindergarten. Mordecai befriended Rigby because he found him funny. That is the simplest possible origin story for a friendship, and it is the most honest. You do not become best friends with someone at age 5 because of shared values, or intellectual compatibility, or mutual career interests. You become best friends because they make you laugh, because something about the way they move through the world strikes you as entertaining. And then years pass, and the laughter becomes the foundation for something much more complicated, something you could not have predicted and would not know how to describe, even if you tried. In the early seasons, the complication was mostly invisible. Season 1 had 12 episodes and ran from September 6th to November 22nd, 2010. Season 2 had 28 episodes and ran from November 29th, 2010 to August 1st, 2011. Across those 40 episodes, the dynamic between Mordecai and Rigby was almost perfectly symmetrical. They were slackers. They avoided work with a creativity that would have been impressive if applied to anything productive. They got into supernatural trouble. They fixed the trouble, usually with help from Skips, who had seen everything before because he was immortal, or through sheer luck that the show never bothered to explain. Benson yelled at them. Pops was kind to them. Muscle Man made jokes about his mother. The same joke, really, over and over, that only High Five Ghost seemed to enjoy. The status quo reset every 11 minutes. You could watch any season 1 or 2 episode in any order and understand exactly who these people were. The formula was airtight. The comfort was total. But symmetry is boring if it never breaks. And the show, slowly, carefully, began introducing cracks in the surface that would eventually reshape the entire structure. The first significant crack came not from an episode about Mordecai and Rigby's friendship directly, but from an episode about Rigby's family. Season 1, Episode 10, an episode simply titled Dawn. Rigby has a younger brother named Dawn, who is, by every measurable standard, superior to Rigby. He is taller. He is more charming. He is more confident. He is more capable. He has a career, an actual career as an accountant, while Rigby barely functions as a groundskeeper. When Dawn visits the park to help resolve a tax audit that Pops caused by attempting to pay taxes with lollipops, which is the kind of sentence that can only exist in a description of Regular Show, everyone immediately gravitates toward him. They think Dawn is the older brother. They think he is cooler. They think he is better. Because in most ways that matter to the people around them, he is. And Rigby, for the first time in the series, breaks open. Not loudly, not dramatically. Not in the way that cartoons typically handle emotion, with exaggerated tears or a musical number. Just honestly, quietly. In a conversation with Mordecai, Rigby admits that he has always been in Dawn's shadow. That people have always preferred his brother. That at his own 6th birthday party, Dawn unintentionally stole his friends and ruined the celebration just by being present. That he feels invisible in his own family. It is the first time the show lets Rigby be something other than a punchline, and it lands hard because you did not expect it. This was a show about a raccoon who stole keyboards from wizards. It was not supposed to make you feel things about sibling rivalry and self-worth. It was not supposed to make you remember your own experiences of feeling second best in a room full of people who love someone else more. Mordecai's response matters here. He does not dismiss Rigby's feelings. He does not tell him to get over it. He does not make a joke. He listens. He sympathizes. He says, in his own understated way, that he understands. And then he supports his friend, quietly, without making a production of it. That small moment, easily overlooked in a season full of supernatural adventures and escalating absurdity, sets up something the show would spend the next 7 years exploring. Mordecai is the one who holds the friendship together. Not because he is smarter or better or more emotionally intelligent, because he is not always any of those things, but because he is willing to meet Rigby where he is, even when where Rigby is happens to be petty, insecure, competitive, or self-destructive. Mordecai shows up. That is his function. That is his gift. Dawn, for his part, turns out to be less of a rival than Rigby imagined. At the end of the episode, when Rigby finally confronts his brother about feeling overshadowed, Dawn immediately apologizes. He says he was just trying to be cool, like Rigby. He gets his hair cut, like Rigby. He does not wear clothes, just like Rigby. He has been imitating his older brother his entire life, not because he thinks Rigby is a loser, but because he looks up to him. The resolution is sweet, and it is also the show's first real statement about perception and reality. Rigby spent years believing he was lesser. Dawn spent the same years believing Rigby was someone worth emulating. Neither of them communicated this to the other, and the gap between what they felt and what they said nearly destroyed a relationship that did not need to be destroyed. That pattern, the gap between interior feeling and exterior expression, would become the central engine of the show's emotional storytelling. Mordecai cannot tell Margaret how he feels. Rigby cannot admit that he forged a letter. Benson cannot express his frustration without exploding. Pops cannot reveal his cosmic origins. Everyone in Regular Show is carrying a secret, or a feeling, or a truth that they cannot figure out how to say out loud. And the adventures, the supernatural escalations, the demons, and the time travel, and the sentient furniture, those are what happen when the unsaid things build up enough pressure to crack reality itself. There is something about the show's visual language that reinforces this idea in a way the dialogue never could. Regular Show looks simple. The character designs are clean and uncluttered, almost minimalist. Mordecai is a blue jay, drawn with elegant economy, a tall, slightly awkward shape that conveys his personality without any need for embellishment. Rigby is even simpler, a small brown raccoon with a perpetual smirk and a posture that suggests he is always either about to do something reckless or just finished doing something reckless. The park itself is drawn in soft greens and browns, a suburban space that could exist in any American town, unremarkable and familiar and warm. Nothing about the art style prepares you for the chaos that erupts from it. And that contrast, the visual ordinariness containing the narrative extraordinariness, mirrors the emotional structure of the show itself. Simple characters containing complex feelings. Ordinary settings containing extraordinary stakes. A regular show that is anything but regular. J.G. Quintel has spoken in interviews about the deliberate simplicity of the show's design. He wanted characters that were easy to read, easy to animate, and easy to project emotion onto. Mordecai and Rigby do not have complex facial rigs or subtle micro-expressions. Their emotions are conveyed through posture, through proximity to each other, through the way they occupy space in a frame. When they are getting along, they stand close. When they are fighting, the camera puts distance between them. When one of them is hurting, the other one is almost always in the same shot, anchoring the scene with their presence even when they do not know what to say. The show tells you about the state of their friendship through composition, not dialogue. It shows you the relationship in the way the characters are positioned relative to each other, and it trusts you to read the visual grammar without having it explained. This visual simplicity is part of what makes the emotional moments hit so hard. When the show pulls back and lets two simply drawn characters sit in silence on the steps of a simply drawn house in a simply drawn park, the absence of visual complexity becomes an asset. There is nothing to distract you from the feeling. No detailed background to study. No elaborate character animation to admire. Just two shapes sitting next to each other, and the enormous weight of everything they are not saying hanging in the air between them. The show earns its emotional payoffs partly through writing, partly through voice acting, and partly through this strategic deployment of visual restraint. It looks easy. It is not. The voice acting, while we are on the subject, deserves recognition for carrying so much of the show's emotional weight. Quintel voices Mordecai himself, bringing an understated, slightly mumbling quality to the character that makes him feel real in a way that more polished vocal performances often do not. Mordecai does not sound like a voice actor playing a character. He sounds like a guy you know, the friend who cannot quite get the words out when something matters, who defaults to a verbal shrug when the situation demands clarity. William Salyers voices Rigby with a higher, more manic energy that complements Mordecai's laid-back delivery perfectly. The two voices together create a texture that is immediately recognizable and deeply comfortable, the audio equivalent of sitting on a familiar couch. Sam Marin, who voiced both Benson and Muscle Man, bringing the frustrated authority of the gumball machine and the crude exuberance of the Green Man to life with equal commitment. And Mark Hamill, who joins the cast in the final season as Antipops, brings a gravitas to the role that elevates the cosmic stakes from cartoon villainy to something genuinely threatening. The show's use of music deserves its own discussion because it is one of the primary tools regular show uses to establish emotional tone. The series has always had an unusually sophisticated relationship with its soundtrack. From the earliest episodes, the show uses licensed music and original compositions to create an atmosphere that is simultaneously nostalgic and present, warm and melancholic. The 1980s influence is everywhere. In the synth textures, in the guitar tones, in the general aesthetic of the show's musical identity. Regular Show sounds like a mixtape your older brother made in 1987, the one with the songs that were already old when he recorded them, but that somehow felt timeless anyway. This musical sensibility is not accidental. Quintel has cited 1980s pop culture as a major influence on the show's aesthetic, and the music reflects that. But it also serves a deeper narrative purpose. The 1980s sound creates a sense of temporal displacement. The show is set in the present day, but it sounds like the past. The characters are young, but the music makes them feel connected to something older. This creates a subliminal sense of nostalgia that permeates every episode, a feeling that what you are watching is already a memory, even as it happens. And that feeling, that sense of watching something precious in the process of becoming past tense, gives the show's emotional moments an extra dimension. When Mordecai and Rigby sit on the steps at the end of an episode, the music tells you that this moment is fleeting, that it will not last, that the afternoon will end and the season will change, and the characters will grow up and the park will eventually be left behind. The music knows the ending before the characters do. In the finale, the music becomes the show's primary emotional instrument. The montage that shows the characters' futures, the one that spans 25 years in a few minutes, uses music to compress time in a way that dialogue never could. You watch Mordecai painting, and Rigby raising his daughters, and Benson retiring, and the park changing around all of them. And the music carries you through these changes with a gentleness that makes the passage of time feel not tragic, but warm. The song says what the characters cannot. It says that time is passing. It says that everything is changing. And it says underneath all of that the change is okay. That the change was always the point. That willingness, Mordecai's willingness to be there for Rigby despite everything, gets tested repeatedly as the series deepens. In Season 2, Episode 24, an episode called More Smarter, Mordecai teases Rigby about not having a high school diploma. It starts as a joke, the kind of casual cruelty that best friends trade without thinking, the verbal equivalent of a light punch on the shoulder. You do not mean it to hurt. You do not think about whether it does. You just say it because the dynamic allows for it, because you have known each other long enough that everything feels safe, even the sharp things. But Rigby does not let it go. The joke hits a nerve, and the nerve runs deep, all the way down to the thing Rigby hates most about himself. He tries going back to school. He falls asleep in class. The teacher kicks him out. He goes online to get his diploma and gets frustrated by a question about the difference between a square and a rectangle. So he finds a chemical called Brain Max, advertised on a pop-up ad, that promises to boost intelligence. He drinks it. It works. He starts getting smarter. And Mordecai, unwilling to let Rigby outperform him at anything, even intelligence, starts drinking it too. What follows is an escalating intellectual arms race. The two of them down more and more Brain Max, well beyond the recommended dosage, until they are operating on a plane of consciousness so elevated that everyone around them, every person in the park, every object in the building, appears idiotic by comparison. The park becomes a wasteland of perceived stupidity. Mordecai and Rigby hover above it all, literally and figuratively, scribbling equations and speaking in a language no one else can understand. Then the effects wear off. They forget almost everything that happened. The status quo returns. But the audience does not forget. What you saw, underneath the comedy, underneath the increasingly absurd visual gags, was the engine that drives their entire friendship exposed and running hot. Rigby cannot stand being lesser. Mordecai cannot stand Rigby being better. They love each other, deeply and genuinely. But there is a competition embedded in the love, a quiet scorekeeping that neither of them acknowledges and both of them feed. They measure themselves against each other constantly, in ways so small and automatic that they have stopped noticing they are doing it. Who is smarter? Who is more competent? Who is more liked? Who is more of an adult? The scorekeeping never stops, and it never resolves, because neither of them actually wants to win. Winning would mean the other one lost, and the other one losing would change the dynamic, and changing the dynamic is the thing they are both most afraid of. That scorekeeping has a history, a dark one, and the show takes its time revealing it, waiting until the relationship is so deeply established in the audience's mind that the revelation can do maximum damage. The single most important piece of backstory in all of regular show does not surface until the movie. Regular show, the movie aired on November 25th, 2015, between seasons 7 and 8. It is a time travel story, because of course it is. A villain named Mr. Ross, who was their high school volleyball coach, threatens to erase the timeline using something called a Timonado. The gang travels through time. There are action sequences and chase scenes, and the kind of escalating stakes that regular show handles better than almost any other animated show. But the time travel is not the point. The spectacle is not the point. The point is the secret. In high school, both Mordecai and Rigby applied to college university. It was the next step, the obvious next step. The thing you do when you are 17, and the future is a door you have not opened yet. Mordecai got in. His grades were good. His art showed promise. The acceptance letter arrived, and with it, the possibility of a life that looked different from the park, from the couch, from the comfortable stasis of doing nothing with your best friend. Rigby did not get in. His grades were abysmal. His behavior in school was disruptive. He regularly goofed off, disappointed his parents, and failed to demonstrate anything resembling academic competence. The rejection was not surprising to anyone except Rigby himself, who had convinced himself that effort was optional and consequences were negotiable. The rejection letter arrived, and with it, the reality that Mordecai was going somewhere and Rigby was staying behind. What Rigby did next was the kind of quiet betrayal that defines not just their friendship, but the entire emotional architecture of the show. He forged a rejection letter. He created a convincing duplicate of the college-university correspondence, addressed it to Mordecai, and made his best friend believe that he, too, had been rejected. He stole Mordecai's future to avoid losing Mordecai's presence. Think about that for a moment. Not the logistics of it, not the cartoon logic that allows a raccoon to convincingly forge university correspondence, but the emotional core. A person who loves you so much that they cannot imagine life without you, and who fears your absence so deeply that they will sabotage your success to prevent it. That is not villainy. It is not malice. It is not even selfishness, not in the simple sense. It is desperation wearing the costume of loyalty. It is love operating at its most destructive frequency. Rigby did not forge that letter because he wanted to hurt Mordecai. He did not do it because he resented Mordecai's success. He did it because the thought of Mordecai leaving, of being alone, of standing in the park without the person who had been beside him since kindergarten, was more terrifying than the thought of Mordecai never reaching his potential. He chose closeness over possibility. He chose the friendship over the friend's future. And the show, to its enormous credit, does not simplify that choice. It does not make Rigby a villain. It makes him a person who did something terrible for a reason that makes perfect emotional sense. When Mordecai finds out, in the movie, the friendship cracks in a way it never has before. Not a surface crack. Not the kind that an 11-minute episode can reset. A structural one. A foundation-level fracture that threatens to bring the entire building down. Mordecai does not yell the way Benson yells, in controlled explosions of manageable frustration that dissipate by the next scene. He goes quiet. He goes cold. In a future timeline sequence, we see a version of Mordecai who became cybernetic, who is estranged from Rigby, who shoots him. Literally shoots his best friend. The movie externalizes the betrayal as a universe-ending threat, but the real threat was always internal. It was always about whether the friendship could survive, knowing what it was built on. Mordecai ends the friendship. He says the words, and in that moment, the show asks the hardest question it has ever asked, harder than any cosmic threat or supernatural crisis. Is a friendship real if it was built on a lie? Can you love someone who stole something from you that you can never get back? Can you forgive something that changed the entire trajectory of your life? The movie answers yes, eventually. Rigby apologizes with a vulnerability the character has never shown before. Mordecai, after everything, after the anger and the cold silence, and the feeling of having been robbed of a future he deserved, chooses to forgive. They reconcile. The timeline is saved. The status quo apparently returns. But the reconciliation does not erase the question. It just files it away, the way real forgiveness does. You do not forget. You do not pretend it did not happen. You do not wake up one morning and find that the knowledge has evaporated from your mind like a dream you cannot quite remember. You carry it. You carry the weight of what the other person did and the weight of your own decision to continue despite it. Mordecai chose to continue, and the show, from that point forward, carries the weight of that choice in every scene where Mordecai and Rigby are together. You watch them play video games after the movie, and you think about the letter. You watch them argue about whose turn it is to mow the lawn, and you think about the letter. The show never mentions it again, but it is always there. The ghost in the room. The third character in every conversation. After high school, after the forged letter convinced Mordecai that college university was not an option, Mordecai attended a junior art college instead. It was a step down from what he could have had. A smaller school. A lesser opportunity. And Rigby, who had no business being at any college, tagged along. He lived in Mordecai's dorm room without being enrolled. He existed in the margins of Mordecai's lesser academic life, a permanent house guest in a future he had personally diminished. Eventually, Mordecai dropped out. The show reveals this detail casually, almost offhandedly. In the season 1 episode Camping Can Be Cool, we learn that Mordecai went to art school. In Fool Me Twice, we learn that he dropped out. The show does not make a big deal of it. There is no flashback episode. There is no dramatic monologue about shattered dreams. Mordecai just is a college dropout, the same way Rigby just is a high school dropout. They are who they are. They ended up where they ended up, the park. But the implications are enormous once you know about the letter. Mordecai, who had the talent and the acceptance letter and the genuine potential to pursue a career in art, ended up at a lesser school because his best friend forged a document. And then he dropped out of even that. Did the lesser school contribute to the dropout? Would Mordecai have thrived at college university in a way he could not thrive at the junior college? Was the dropout inevitable? A product of Mordecai's own lack of discipline? Or was it a downstream consequence of having the wrong door open for him? The show never answers these questions. That ambiguity is deliberate. It lets you sit with the possibility that Rigby's one act of selfish love shaped both of their lives in ways neither of them fully understands. It lets you wonder whether the park, the couch, the video games, the entire comfortable stasis of their 20s is a choice or a consequence. So they end up at the park. Two dropouts, one who never finished high school and one who never finished college, working as groundskeepers for a sentient gumball machine who yells at them daily, living in a house owned by their employer, sleeping in bunk beds like children, surrounded by characters who are, in various ways, also stuck. Muscle Man, who hides his insecurities behind crude jokes. High Five Ghost, who drifts through scenes without making much of an impact. Skips, who is immortal and has seen everything and is tired in a way that immortals get tired. Pops, who is innocent to the point of vulnerability. And Benson, who is responsible and competent and furious, not because Mordecai and Rigby are bad employees, but because they remind him of the gap between what the park could be and what it is. For the first 2 seasons of the show, this ensemble is the joke. These are people who are exactly where their choices have placed them, doing the minimum, surrounded by the bizarre and unwilling or unable to confront the things that put them here. The comedy comes from the contrast between the smallness of their lives and the enormity of the supernatural events that keep disrupting them. They cannot set up chairs without summoning a demon. They cannot run an errand without bending the laws of physics. They are small people in a large universe, and the universe keeps reminding them of it. But before the show confronts that smallness directly, it spends time establishing what the park means to the people who work there. And what it means, beneath the jokes and the supernatural chaos, is safety. The park is a bubble. It is a place where you can be 23 forever, where the demands of adult life, career progression, financial responsibility, romantic commitment never quite reach you. Mordecai and Rigby are not just slacking off. They are hiding. They are using the park and each other and the comfortable rhythm of their avoidance as a shelter from the terrifying openness of a life that has not been figured out yet. The show understands this, and it treats it with compassion rather than judgment. There is a reason the early seasons feel so warm, so inviting, so much like a place you want to spend time in. It is because the park is comfortable. It is because the dynamic between Mordecai and Rigby is comfortable. It is because doing nothing with your best friend, sitting on a couch with a bag of chips and a video game controller while the afternoon dissolves around you, is one of the most genuinely pleasurable experiences a human being can have. And the show captures it with a precision that borders on documentary. You know that feeling. You have been on that couch. You have wasted those afternoons. And there is a part of you, the part that grew up and got a job and started paying rent and learned what a retirement account was. That misses it. That misses the weightlessness of having nowhere to be and nothing to prove and no one to disappoint, except a gumball machine who is going to yell at you regardless. The show lets you sit in that comfort for 2 full seasons before it starts applying pressure. And the pressure, when it comes, arrives not through external force, but through the characters themselves. They start wanting things. They start needing things that the park cannot provide. Mordecai starts wanting Margaret. Rigby starts wanting to matter. Benson starts wanting the park to be more than a monument to everyone else's mediocrity. And these wants, once activated, cannot be deactivated. You cannot unwant something. You cannot go back to the couch and pretend that the restlessness is not there. The restlessness is the beginning of growth, and growth is the beginning of the end of comfort. The confrontation with that restlessness, when it finally becomes unavoidable, arrives not through the friendship, but through romance. And this is where the story of Mordecai splits from the story of Rigby, and the show becomes something more complex than a buddy comedy about 2 slackers at a park. Mordecai's love life is, to put it charitably, a disaster. It is the longest-running subplot in the entire series, spanning from the earliest episodes to the season 6 finale, and it is also the subplot that generates the most debate among fans. Some viewers think the romance arcs are the best thing about the show, the most emotionally honest exploration of young adult dating that any cartoon has attempted. Others think they drag the show down, turning Mordecai from a likable protagonist into a frustrating one. Both positions are defensible. Both miss the larger point. The romance arcs are not about romance. They are about Mordecai's inability to make decisions, and the slowly dawning realization that indecision is itself a decision. The worst kind, because it hurts everyone and satisfies no one. The catalyst is Margaret. Margaret Smith, a Red Robin who works as a waitress at a coffee shop near the park, appears in the show's earliest episodes as a background character before gradually becoming central to Mordecai's emotional life. He develops feelings for her almost immediately. The attraction is obvious to everyone except Margaret, and perhaps to Margaret as well, who either cannot see it or chooses not to acknowledge it. Mordecai is spectacularly incapable of acting on his feelings. He stutters around her. He overthinks every interaction. He manufactures reasons to visit the coffee shop that have nothing to do with coffee. Rigby watches all of this with a mixture of amusement and exasperation, occasionally trying to help, more often making things worse. Across seasons 1, 2, and 3, the Margaret situation becomes a running thread that the show weaves through the episodic structure. In some episodes, it is front and center, with Mordecai attempting some grand gesture that inevitably backfires. In others, it is just a background hum, a reminder that Mordecai's emotional life is as stuck as his professional one. The show handles this with a patience that is unusual for a cartoon. Most animated series would resolve a romantic subplot within a season. Regular show lets it breathe across 3 full seasons, 60-something episodes, building up the tension drop by drop until the payoff becomes inevitable. Season 3 ends with Bad Kiss, the 39th episode of the season and its finale, which aired on September 3rd, 2012. In that episode, Mordecai and Margaret finally kiss. It should be a triumph. It is, instead, a catastrophe. Because Mordecai's breath is terrible, and the moment is ruined almost before it begins. The show takes what should be a straightforward romantic payoff, the moment the audience has been waiting for since season 1, and turns it into something awkward, human, and a little bit sad. That is the regular show approach to romance. Nothing is clean. Nothing goes the way you planned it. Everything costs more than you expected. Even the things you want, especially the things you want, arrive damaged. In season 4, the romance actually works. Mordecai and Margaret date. They are a couple. They go on dates. They have conversations that are not about whether they should be together, but about the actual experience of being together. For a stretch of episodes, the show allows itself to be a show about a guy with a girlfriend, and it handles it with surprising normalcy. Mordecai picks Margaret up from the airport in the episode Picking Up Margaret. She has a college interview, and on the way to the airport she is chased by some guys, and Mordecai helps her get there safely. She kisses him. It is sweet. It is simple. It is the kind of relationship moment that the show spent 3 seasons building toward, and now that it is here, it feels earned. Then, season 4 ends. Stake Me Amadeus, the season finale, aired on August 12th, 2013. It is the episode that changes everything. Not because something supernatural happens, but because something human does. Margaret gets accepted to her dream college. She has to leave town. She tells Mordecai in a restaurant that she cannot be his girlfriend anymore. She bursts into tears. She runs out of the restaurant, devastated that she has to leave him. And Mordecai sits there, in the emptying restaurant, in the silence, in the aftermath of something he did not see coming and could not have prevented. The show does not frame this as a tragedy. That is the important part. It does not frame Margaret as the villain for leaving or Mordecai as the victim for being left. It frames the breakup as a natural consequence of 2 people growing in different directions. Margaret is choosing her future. She is choosing education, ambition, the version of herself that exists beyond the coffee shop and the park and the comfortable radius of her current life. Mordecai is being left behind. And both of those things can be true at the same time. And both of those things can hurt. And neither of them is wrong. The show trusts its audience to understand that love is not always enough. That timing matters. That 2 people can be right for each other and still be at the wrong point in their lives. What follows, across seasons 5 and 6, is the messiest, most divisive, and most emotionally honest stretch of the entire series. Mordecai, still recovering from Margaret's departure, meets CJ. CJ, whose full name is Cloudy J, is a cloud person. She is cool, in a way that Margaret was poised. She is fun, in a way that Margaret was warm. She likes video games and extreme sports and does not take herself too seriously. She is, by almost any measure, a great match for Mordecai. She challenges him. She calls him out. She does not put up with his inability to communicate. They start dating in season 5. The relationship becomes official in the season finale, Real Date, which aired on August 14th, 2014. In that episode, Mordecai saves CJ's life during a date gone wrong, and the grand gesture works the way grand gestures are supposed to work. They kiss. They are together. The show seems to be saying that Mordecai has learned from the Margaret experience, that he is capable of moving forward, that the romantic subplot is heading toward a satisfying resolution. Then Margaret comes back to town. She comes back for the holidays, and her presence detonates everything Mordecai has built with CJ. The Christmas episode, often referred to by fans as the Merry Christmas Mordecai incident, becomes the flashpoint for the final act of the love triangle. At Eileen's Christmas party, which both Mordecai and CJ are attending, Margaret shows up. Mordecai and Margaret end up talking. Old feelings surface, and they kiss. Not intentionally, not romantically, or at least not in the way either of them would describe it. It is the kind of muscle memory intimacy that happens when two people who loved each other are suddenly in the same room, in the warm light, with the distance between them temporarily collapsed. CJ sees it. She drives off, heartbroken. The damage is immediate and specific, and irreversible in the way that trust violations always are. You can apologize for a kiss. You can explain the context. You can say it did not mean anything, and you might even believe it. But the image does not go away. The person who saw it cannot unsee it. And the relationship, which was built on the premise that Mordecai had moved on from Margaret, now has a crack running through its foundation. The show handles the aftermath with brutal honesty. Mordecai reconciles with CJ eventually after receiving advice from a character called Sad Sax Guy, which is exactly the kind of absurd narrative device that regular show uses to deliver genuine emotional wisdom. They get back together, but the trust is not fully restored. CJ is wary around Margaret now, in a way that she was not before. And Mordecai, for his part, does not help. He does not resolve the situation cleanly. He does not choose. He wants both of them in his life, Margaret as a friend and CJ as a girlfriend, and he cannot or will not see that this arrangement is unsustainable. In Season 6, the love triangle tightens until it strangles. The show keeps putting Mordecai in situations where he has to navigate both relationships simultaneously, and he keeps failing, not because he is cruel, but because he is paralyzed. He cannot commit fully to CJ, because part of him still belongs to Margaret, to the idea of Margaret, to the version of their relationship that ended before he was ready to let it end. He cannot go back to Margaret because she already left once, and also because going back would mean admitting that the CJ relationship was a rebound, which it was not, or at least not entirely. He is stuck. He is stuck in the worst possible way. The way you get stuck when every option requires giving something up, and you would rather give up nothing and lose everything. Season 6 ends with Dumped at the Altar, which aired on June 25th, 2015. It is, on the surface, a wedding episode. Muscle Man is marrying Starla. The park crew is in attendance. It should be a celebration. Instead, it becomes the final reckoning for Mordecai's love life. During the wedding, Mordecai reads a letter from Muscle Man's father, Muscle Dad, that forces him to confront his own dishonesty. He realizes that he has been lying to CJ, to Margaret, and to himself. He tries to talk to CJ. He starts to tell her something, and it was later confirmed by the show's creators that he was going to break up with her. But CJ interrupts him. She already knows. She has known for a while. She gives back the bracelet he gave her. She says it is over. She cries. They never speak to each other again. Not in the rest of the season. Not in the rest of the series. Their final interaction is a tearful goodbye at someone else's wedding, and the show lets that stand as the last word on Mordecai's most significant romantic failure. After the wedding, Mordecai does something the show has never allowed him to do before. He stops. He tells his friends, and through them the audience, that he is taking a break from dating. No more romance. No more love triangles. No more choosing. Because the problem was never about which person to choose. The problem was that Mordecai used relationships as a way to avoid confronting himself. He poured all of his emotional energy into the question of who he should be with, and that question became a substitute for the harder question of who he should be. That decision to stop dating, which the show treats with surprising weight and seriousness, is Mordecai's most significant act of growth in the entire series. It is the moment where Mordecai stops being reactive and starts being deliberate. For 6 seasons, Mordecai's emotional life has been defined by reaction. Margaret shows interest, and he reacts by pursuing her. Margaret leaves, and he reacts by being devastated. CJ appears, and he reacts by attaching to her. Margaret returns, and he reacts by kissing her. CJ finds out, and he reacts by trying to manage the fallout. Every emotional beat in Mordecai's romantic history is a reaction to something that happened to him, not a choice he made about what he wanted. The decision to stop dating is the first time Mordecai acts instead of reacting. He looks at the pattern of his behavior. He sees it clearly for perhaps the first time, and he makes a conscious choice to interrupt it. That is not just growth. That is maturity. That is the difference between a person who is carried by the current of their own impulses and a person who stands in the river and chooses which direction to walk. The show reinforces this growth by changing how it treats Mordecai in the episodes that follow. In Season 7, Mordecai is calmer. He is less anxious. He participates in conversations without looking for romantic subtext. He interacts with women without the performance anxiety that defined his earlier encounters. He is, for the first time in the series, comfortable in his own skin. Not because he figured everything out. Not because he achieved some kind of emotional enlightenment. But because he stopped trying to be someone else's idea of a boyfriend and started figuring out who he actually was when he was not performing for an audience. There is a quiet tragedy in this growth, and the show acknowledges it without dwelling on it. Mordecai's most significant personal development happens after his last significant relationship ends. His best version of himself emerges in the absence of romance, not because romance was holding him back, but because the pursuit of romance was a substitute for the harder work of self-knowledge. He was so busy trying to figure out who he should be with that he never figured out who he was. And when the relationships finally stop, when the noise of the love triangle finally fades, what remains is a person who is ready to become himself. The irony is that this person, the real Mordecai, the one who emerges in Seasons 7 and 8, is the person that both Margaret and CJ saw glimpses of, but could never fully reach. He was always there. He was just hiding behind the performance. It is not dramatic. It does not come with a musical cue or a montage. It is just a guy saying, I need to stop doing this thing that is hurting everyone, including me. And then actually stopping, which sounds simple and is, in practice, one of the hardest things a person can do. For the rest of the series, Mordecai is single. He focuses on the job, on his friends, on being present in the moment, without using romance as a distraction or a crutch. The show does not give him a new love interest. It does not hint at a reconciliation with Margaret or CJ. It just lets him exist as a complete person who happens to be alone, and it does not treat that aloneness as a problem to be solved. In the finale, 25 years later, Mordecai has become an artist. He is married to a woman named Steph, a bat he met at an art show. They have 3 children. He found love eventually, but the show does not show you the finding. It does not dramatize the meeting or the courtship or the proposal. It just shows you the result. A happy family, a successful career, a life built in the years after the camera stopped rolling. The show is saying something important about growth with that choice. Not all progress is visible. Not all arcs have turning points you can point to and say, there, that is the moment everything changed. Sometimes the most significant change a person makes is the one nobody witnesses. The decision to stop chasing the wrong thing and wait, with patience and faith, for the right thing to arrive on its own terms. Mordecai does not get a graduation scene. He does not get a triumphant moment of transformation. He just transforms, off-screen, over years, the way most people do. There is a parallel worth drawing here between Mordecai's romantic journey and the larger theme of the show. Regular Show is, at its core, a show about the gap between intention and execution. Mordecai intends to be a good boyfriend. He intends to be honest. He intends to choose. But intention without action is just another form of avoidance. And avoidance is the thing that Mordecai and Rigby have been doing since the first episode. The romance arcs are the show's way of telling Mordecai, and through him, the audience, that you cannot avoid your way into the life you want. At some point, the comfortable inaction has to end. At some point, you have to make a choice, even if the choice is wrong, even if the choice hurts someone. Because the alternative, the paralysis, the endless deferral, hurts everyone more. Mordecai learns this lesson slowly, the way he learns everything, through repetition and failure, and the accumulating weight of consequences he did not intend to create. By the time he stops dating, by the time he says enough, he has left a trail of hurt feelings and broken promises behind him. Not because he is cruel, but because he was afraid. Afraid of choosing wrong. Afraid of losing something. Afraid that a decision, once made, would close a door he might want to walk through later. And the irony, the cruel and beautiful irony that the show handles with such understated grace, is that his refusal to close any doors meant that all the doors closed anyway. Margaret left. CJ left. And Mordecai was alone, standing in the wreckage of two relationships he could have saved if he had been willing to sacrifice the illusion of having everything. That lesson, the lesson that life requires choosing, and that choosing requires giving something up, is the same lesson the show teaches about friendship, about work, about growing up. The park is comfortable because it asks nothing of you. The couch is comfortable because it demands nothing. But comfort, sustained too long, becomes stagnation. And stagnation, the show argues, across 8 seasons, is the real enemy. Not demons, not cosmic threats, not even the cyclical destruction of the universe. The real enemy is the refusal to change, the insistence on staying where you are because where you are feels safe, even when safe has become another word for stuck. Rigby is the character who understands this first, which is surprising given that he spent the first 5 seasons of the show being the one most committed to stasis. But that is how growth works sometimes. The person who is furthest from change is the one who feels the need for it most acutely, because they are the one who knows. On some level, they would never articulate what they are missing. While Mordecai was learning how to fail at love, slowly and painfully, over 3 seasons of romantic entanglement, Rigby was doing something much more interesting. He was growing up, and he was doing it so quietly that you could miss it entirely if you were not paying attention. Rigby's arc across the later seasons of regular show is one of the most underappreciated character developments in animated television. It does not announce itself. There is no single episode where Rigby declares that he is a new person now. No dramatic before and after that the show uses to mark the change. You just look up one day, around season 6 or 7, and realize that the raccoon who used to steal keyboards from wizards and fall asleep in class and forge rejection letters to sabotage his best friend's future has become someone you genuinely respect. Not in spite of who he was, because of who he was. Because the growth means more when you know what the person was growing from. The turning point, if you had to identify a single one, is Eileen. Eileen Roberts, a mole who works at the coffee shop alongside Margaret, enters the show as a peripheral character with a one-note premise. She has a crush on Rigby. That is her defining trait in the early episodes. She appears in the season 2 episode Do Me a Solid, and at that point, Rigby does not care about her at all. He does not consider her a friend. He barely registers her existence. The show plays his disinterest for comedy, the oblivious guy who cannot see what is right in front of him. And for a while, that is all it is. Another running gag in a show full of running gags. But Eileen keeps showing up. And Rigby, incrementally, in changes so small they are almost subliminal, starts noticing. In the episode Camping Can Be Cool, Eileen impresses him by starting a fire without matches, using some kind of wilderness skill that nobody expected her to have. Rigby's response is simple. He says, "That was cool." 2 words, no confession, no dramatic shift. Just a tiny recalibration of attention. A moment where he looks at Eileen and sees something he had not bothered to look for before. That tiny recalibration becomes the foundation for everything that follows. The show does not rush the relationship. It does not force it into a dramatic arc. It lets Rigby and Eileen grow closer at the pace of real life, which is to say slowly, awkwardly, with plenty of setbacks and miscommunications, and moments where neither of them knows exactly what they are to each other. By the time Dumped at the Altar airs in Season 6, Rigby reveals almost casually that he and Eileen have been dating for 3 months. 3 months. The show did not announce it. It did not build up to it with a dramatic confession scene or a season finale kiss. It just let it happen, off screen, the way relationships sometimes happen in real life. You are friends, and then you are dating, and the transition is so gradual that you cannot point to the exact moment it changed. Someone asks, and you say, "I guess we have been together for about 3 months," and you are surprised by the number because it feels like it has been both longer and shorter than that. What Eileen gives Rigby, more than romance, more than companionship, is evidence. She is smart, genuinely and thoroughly smart, with a college degree and a mind that processes the world with clarity and precision. She reads books. She has opinions about things that matter. She is competent in ways that Rigby has spent his entire life being insecure about. And here's the crucial part. Instead of making Rigby feel lesser, the way Dawn sometimes did, the way Mordecai occasionally did with his casual teasing, she makes him feel like he could be more. Not by pushing him, not by lecturing, not by setting conditions or issuing ultimatums, just by existing as proof that intelligence does not have to be threatening, that competence does not have to be competitive, that you can be with someone who is better than you at something without that fact diminishing who you are. Eileen does not fix Rigby. That is not how people work, and the show is smart enough to know it. You cannot love someone into being a better person. You can only love them while they figure out, on their own terms, whether they want to try. What Eileen does is create an environment where trying feels safe, where failure does not mean the end of everything, where the gap between who you are and who you could be is not a chasm, but a step. The episode titled The Eileen Plan, which aired during Season 7, is one of the most important episodes in the entire series for understanding what Rigby's relationship with Eileen means to both of them. In that episode, Rigby tries to create an elaborate plan for a date with Eileen, constructing a complicated series of events designed to impress her. The plan falls apart, as plans always do in regular show, and what remains is just the two of them, alone, without the structure of the plan to hide behind. And it turns out that just the two of them is enough. The episode's quiet conclusion, the realization that the best version of their relationship is the unplanned one, the one where they are simply present with each other without trying to perform or impress, is a microcosm of the show's entire philosophy. Stop trying to control everything. Stop building elaborate plans. Just show up. Just be there. The rest will take care of itself. Eileen's influence on Rigby extends beyond the romantic. She changes his relationship with his own intelligence. In the early seasons, Rigby treats his lack of education as a badge of honor, a defiant rejection of the system that rejected him. He does not want to be smart. He does not want to learn. He wants to play video games and eat junk food and never think about anything that requires sustained mental effort. But Eileen is smart, and she does not make him feel stupid for not being smart. She includes him in conversations about things he does not understand. She shares her interests without condescension. She creates a space where curiosity is welcome and ignorance is not punished. And Rigby, slowly, reluctantly, begins to be curious. He begins to ask questions. He begins to care about things he used to dismiss. The show never draws a straight line between Eileen's influence and Rigby's decision to go back to school, but the line is there, visible to anyone who pays attention to the way the two of them interact across seasons 5, 6, and 7. Season 7 makes this explicit in a way that the earlier seasons only hinted at. Rigby, the high school dropout, the guy who could not tell a square from a rectangle, the person who forged a rejection letter rather than face his own limitations, decides to go back to school. He needs one more class to earn his diploma, physical education, and the teacher, in one of those coincidences that the show uses to test its characters at their most vulnerable moments, is a former bully who tormented him in high school. The show could have played this as pure comedy. It does, partly. There are jokes. There are absurd situations. There are the kind of escalations that regular show specializes in, where a gym class somehow becomes a life or death scenario. But underneath the comedy, the show is playing for stakes that are entirely emotional. Rigby has to face the person who made him feel small. He has to sit in a classroom and do the work he avoided when he was 17. He has to prove, not to Eileen, not to Mordecai, not to Benson, or his parents, or anyone else, but to himself, that he is not the same person who ran away. That the boy who could not handle rejection has become a man who can handle difficulty. That growth is not just possible, but already happening. The season 7 finale is called Rigby's Graduation Day Special. It aired on June 30th, 2016, as a double-length episode. In that episode, Rigby receives his high school diploma. He stands on a stage in front of a crowd. He gives a speech that is broadcast live on a television show called Inspire America. He names Eileen as his inspiration. He names Mordecai as his friend. He stands there in his cap and gown, and the show lets the moment breathe. There is no supernatural interruption during the speech itself. No demon emerges from the floor. No time portal opens. Just a raccoon in a graduation cap, saying thank you to the people who helped him get there. And then, because this is regular show, and nothing is ever simple, the park gets launched into space. Mr. Maillard's dome experiment activates. The ground shakes. The park lifts off. And Season 8, the final season, begins in orbit. That graduation scene, before the launch, is not just a plot point. It is the show delivering its thesis about Rigby as loudly and clearly as it ever will. The raccoon who could not face a rejection letter can now stand in front of a national television audience and talk about what he has learned. The person who sabotaged his best friend's future has finally earned his own. The growth is real. It is earned. And it happened not because of a single dramatic moment, not because of a revelation or an epiphany or a magical substance that accelerated his brain, but because of years of small choices, small failures, small recoveries, adding up. That is how growth works. Not in breakthroughs, in accumulation. And Mordecai, watching his best friend graduate, watching from the audience as Rigby stands on the stage and says the things he needs to say, does not seem jealous. He does not seem threatened. He does not keep score. He seems proud. Genuinely, simply proud. And that is growth too, just quieter. Mordecai's ability to celebrate Rigby's success without measuring it against his own failures is the most Mordecai thing the show ever lets him do. It is the thing he has been learning since Season 1, since the Dawn episode, since every moment where he chose to support his friend instead of competing with him. He has been practicing generosity for 7 seasons, and this is the payoff. But before we get to the final season, it is worth pausing to consider the world these two characters inhabited for 7 years. Because the story of Mordecai and Rigby is not just the story of two friends. It is the story of a community. A strange, dysfunctional, deeply loyal community of people who work at a park and somehow keep ending up at the center of the universe. Benson deserves more than a footnote in this narrative. He is the gumball machine. He is the manager. He is the person who has to care about the park because someone has to, and he is furious about it. Benson's anger is one of the most consistent elements of the show, and it would be easy to read it as one-dimensional. The boss who yells, the authority figure who exists to create obstacles. But the show gives Benson layers, and those layers accumulate across seasons until you realize that his anger is not really about Mordecai and Rigby at all. It is about the gap between aspiration and reality. Benson wanted to be a drummer. He was in a band. He had dreams that had nothing to do with managing a public park. He ended up here the same way Mordecai and Rigby ended up here, through a series of compromises and disappointments that were individually small and collectively defining. The difference is that Benson responds to his disappointment with responsibility instead of avoidance. He channels his frustrated ambition into the park, into making it run, into making it matter. And Mordecai and Rigby's refusal to take any of it seriously feels, to Benson, like a personal insult. They are not just bad employees. They are reminders of the version of himself that gave up. The Season 3 episode, Think Positive, which aired in 2012, crystallizes this dynamic perfectly. Pops, disturbed by Benson's constant yelling, threatens to fire him if he does not stop. Benson tries. He tries anger management techniques. He tries counting to 100. He tries mantras and deep breathing and every tool available to a person who has been told that the only way they express their passion is destructive and must stop. And he almost makes it. He gets to about 80 in his count. Then he looks out the window and sees Mordecai and Rigby ramming their paint-covered bodies into a shed, and the rage that has been building inside him forms a gravitational orb that literally starts tearing the park apart. Pops relents. He tells Benson it is okay to yell. Benson unleashes everything he has been holding back, and the explosion is so massive that it destroys the entire park. Then he calmly tells Mordecai and Rigby to clean it up or they are fired. That episode is about Benson, but it is also about the ecosystem of the park. Everyone in it needs everyone else. Mordecai and Rigby need Benson to give their aimlessness structure. Benson needs Mordecai and Rigby to give his authority purpose. Pops needs all of them to be the family he never quite had at home with Mr. Maillard. Skips needs the park to give his immortality meaning, a place to be useful, a group of people to protect. Muscle Man needs an audience for his jokes. High Five Ghost needs Muscle Man. The park is a web of mutual dependency disguised as a workplace, and every character in it is getting something from the others that they cannot get anywhere else. Mordecai and Rigby exist at the center of that web not because they are the most important or the most capable, but because they are the most disruptive. They are the ones who pull the thread. They are the catalysts, the agents of chaos whose small mistakes trigger the supernatural escalations that force everyone else to show who they really are. When a demon appears because Mordecai and Rigby tried to cheat at a video game, it is Skips who has to draw on centuries of knowledge to banish it. When a bet spirals into a life or death contest, it is Benson who has to hold the team together. When the emotional stakes rise, it is Pops whose kindness becomes the anchor. Mordecai and Rigby do not solve problems. They create them. And in creating them, they give everyone else in the park a reason to be extraordinary. There is something worth saying about the show's relationship with consequences, because it is one of the most misunderstood aspects of the series. On the surface, regular show appears to have no consequences. Mordecai and Rigby destroy things. The things get rebuilt. They anger Benson. Benson threatens to fire them. He does not fire them. The next episode starts fresh. It looks like a consequence-free zone. A cartoon world where nothing sticks and nothing matters, and the reset button gets pressed every 11 minutes. But that is not what is happening. The consequences in regular show are not material. They are emotional. The park gets rebuilt, but the experience of destroying it and rebuilding it changes the people who did it. Benson does not fire them. but the pattern of disappointment and frustration accumulates in him across seasons, shaping him into someone who is both angrier and more resigned than he was in the pilot. Mordecai and Rigby do not face external punishment for their mistakes, but they face internal ones. Every failed relationship, every betrayal, every moment of cowardice or dishonesty adds a layer to their understanding of themselves. The show's consequences are psychological, not physical. And psychological consequences, unlike material ones, do not reset. They build. They accumulate. They become the foundation for character development that is so gradual you do not notice it happening until you compare the first episode with the last and realize that you are looking at different people. This approach to consequences is what allows the show to function simultaneously as an episodic comedy and a long-form character study. Individual episodes are consequence-free. You can watch any one of them in isolation and enjoy it as a self-contained story about two friends getting into trouble. But the series as a whole is the opposite of consequence-free. The series is a 7-year experiment in cumulative emotional development, where every episode adds something, usually something small, usually something invisible, to the characters' internal lives. And when you watch the whole thing, when you sit down and go through all 244 episodes in order, you see the experiment playing out in real time. You see Mordecai becoming slightly less confident after each romantic failure. You see Rigby becoming slightly more self-aware after each encounter with his own limitations. You see Benson becoming slightly more tolerant. Skips becoming slightly more invested. Muscle Man becoming slightly more human. The changes are so small that they barely register from episode to episode. But from season to season, from premiere to finale, from the power to a regular epic final battle, they are unmistakable. Skips is worth lingering on, because his relationship with Mordecai and Rigby reveals something about the show's understanding of mentorship and experience. Skips is immortal. He has lived for centuries. He has seen empires rise and fall, has encountered every kind of supernatural threat, has buried people he loved, and watched the world change around him while he remained the same. He works at a park. He fixes things. He skips everywhere he goes, which is how he got his name. And the show never fully explains why. He is the most qualified person in any room he enters, and he chooses to spend his time maintaining a public park alongside two slackers who cannot be bothered to mow a lawn without accidentally summoning a portal to another dimension. Why does Skips stay? The show never gives a definitive answer, but it implies one across dozens of episodes. Skips stays because the park gives him something that immortality took away: the ability to matter to specific people. When you live forever, individual relationships become temporary by nature. Everyone you love will die. Every friendship is a countdown. Skips has experienced this enough times to know that attachment is the price of caring, and he pays it anyway. He stays at the park because Mordecai and Rigby are, in their own chaotic way, worth caring about. They are alive in a way that an immortal being finds refreshing. They make mistakes with abandon. They love without calculation. They are messy and irresponsible and relentlessly present. And Skips, who has been alive long enough to know how rare genuine presence is, chooses to be near it. Muscle Man and High Five Ghost add a different texture to the community. Muscle Man is crude and loud and repetitive, cycling through variations of the same maternal joke until the other characters want to scream. But beneath the crudeness, there is a person who works harder than Mordecai and Rigby, who falls in love deeply and permanently with Starla, who cries at movies and cares about his friends more than he will ever say directly. High Five Ghost is his counterpart, quiet where Muscle Man is loud, supportive where Muscle Man is demanding, the person who laughs at the jokes nobody else finds funny, because that is what friendship sometimes looks like. Being the audience someone needs, even when the material is not good. The park taken together is a portrait of how people who have nowhere else to go build a family out of proximity and shared weirdness. Nobody in regular show chose to be there. Not really. They all ended up at the park through some combination of failure, obligation, and accident. But having arrived, they chose to stay. And having stayed, they chose each other. That choice, repeated across 7 years and 8 seasons and 244 episodes, is the same choice Mordecai and Rigby make with each other. It is the choice to show up, to be present, to remain, even when remaining is hard, even when the park is floating through space, even when the universe is ending. There is another thread running through the show that deserves attention before we reach the finale, and that is the show's relationship with its own escalation. Regular show has a problem, or rather, it has a feature that looks like a problem, depending on how you view it. The show escalates everything. A trip to the grocery store becomes a battle with a supernatural entity. A game of basketball ends with someone challenging death to a rematch. A simple bet about who can eat more hot dogs becomes a competition judged by interdimensional beings. The escalation is the engine of the comedy, and it is also the engine of the show's emotional philosophy. Because what the escalation does, beneath the comedy, is test the characters. Every supernatural crisis is a stress test for the relationships at the park. When a demon shows up, who stands their ground and who runs? When the stakes are cosmically high, who remembers that the original problem was just a game of rock, paper, scissors? When reality itself is falling apart, who holds on to the person next to them and who lets go? Mordecai and Rigby, over and over, hold on. Not because they are brave, not because they are strong, but because they are together. The show establishes early and reinforces constantly that Mordecai and Rigby are stronger as a pair than as individuals. Alone, Mordecai is indecisive and passive, prone to overthinking and underdoing. Alone, Rigby is impulsive and reckless, prone to acting without thinking and dealing with consequences, never. Together, they balance. Mordecai's caution tempers Rigby's chaos. Rigby's energy overcomes Mordecai's paralysis. They are, in the language of physics, complementary forces, each one canceling out the other's excesses and amplifying the other's strengths. Think about the episode Best Burgers in the World from Season 3, where Mordecai and Rigby go through an elaborate series of challenges just to eat a burger. The burger is the stated goal. The real story is the way they negotiate the challenges together. The way Mordecai provides the plan and Rigby provides the reckless energy. The way they fail separately and succeed together. Or consider the episode Death Punchies from Season 1, where Rigby's desire to beat Mordecai at punchies sends him to the underworld to learn Death Kwon-Do. The supernatural escalation is extreme, as it always is, but the emotional engine is simple. Rigby cannot stand losing to Mordecai. Mordecai cannot stand Rigby's obsession with winning. They are fighting over something trivial, a punching game, but the fight reveals the deeper current of competition that runs beneath their friendship. These episodes, taken individually, are 11-minute comedies. Taken together across 244 episodes, they form a comprehensive map of a friendship in all its complexity, its generosity and its pettiness, its warmth and its competitiveness, its ability to absorb damage, and its vulnerability to the right kind of blow. That complementarity is tested most severely in the episodes where they are separated. Whenever the show puts distance between them, whether physical or emotional, both characters become lesser versions of themselves. Mordecai without Rigby becomes timid and overthinking. Rigby without Mordecai becomes directionless and self-destructive. The show uses these separations strategically, placing them at moments when the audience needs to be reminded of what the friendship provides. The separation in the movie, after the forged letter is revealed, is the most extreme example. Without Rigby, Mordecai becomes a cybernetic soldier in a dystopian future, cold and efficient, and emptied of the warmth that defined him. Without Mordecai, Rigby becomes a fugitive, desperate and alone, chased through time by consequences he cannot outrun. They need each other, not in a dependent, unhealthy way, but in the way that two halves of a complete system need each other. Remove one, and the other still functions, but differently, diminished, off balance. The show never romanticizes this need. It is honest about the costs of codependency, about the ways that loving someone too much can lead you to forge a letter or tolerate behavior you should not tolerate, or lose yourself in someone else's drama. But it is also honest about the alternative. Being alone is not better. Independence for its own sake is not growth. The goal is not to not need anyone. The goal is to need someone for the right reasons, in the right way, with the full knowledge of what you are asking for and what you are giving in return. By the end of the series, Mordecai and Rigby have found that balance. They need each other, but they do not depend on each other. They love each other, but they have their own lives. They are connected, but they are not fused. The 25-year jump at the end of the show is the show's way of saying that this is what healthy friendship looks like in the long run. Not constant proximity. Not shared apartments and bunk beds and every waking moment spent in the same room, but a bond that persists across distance and time, and the fundamental changes that life imposes on everyone who lives it long enough. There is one more thing worth noting about the period between Rigby's graduation and the finale. The show, across its 7 seasons on Earth, had been slowly and quietly building a mythology. Not in the way that serialized dramas build mythology, with season-long arcs and cliffhangers and puzzle box narratives. In the regular show way, which is to say casually, almost accidentally, through individual episodes that each add one small piece to a picture you do not realize you are assembling until you step back far enough to see it. The supernatural elements of the show were never random. They followed a logic, a cosmology that the show revealed in fragments across years. Death is a real person, a skeletal figure who drives a car and plays sports and can be negotiated with if you know the rules. The baby ducks are a group of ducks that can merge into a giant humanoid figure and fight monsters, and they keep coming back across multiple seasons as allies. The Guardians of Eternal Youth are real, ancient beings who grant immortality and play games with the fates of mortals. Gary, the wizard whose keyboard Mordecai and Rigby stole in the very first episode, is part of a larger magical community that exists alongside the mundane world. Each of these elements, introduced individually for comedic effect, accumulates into a universe that is far more complex and structured than it appears. This accumulated mythology is what makes the cosmic revelation of Season 8 feel earned rather than arbitrary. When the show tells you that Pops is a cosmic being, that Anti-Pops exists, that the universe has been resetting every 14 billion years, it does not feel like a twist pulled from nowhere. It feels like the logical conclusion of everything the show has been building. If death is real, if magic is real, if the fabric of reality can be torn by a keyboard, or a video game, or a pair of enchanted hot dogs, then why would the ultimate stakes of this universe be anything less than the existence of the universe itself? The show spent 7 seasons normalizing the impossible, and then, in the final season, it revealed that the impossible had always been the point. Season 8 sends the park into space. The premise sounds absurd when you say it out loud, and it is absurd, but it is also the logical endpoint of a show that has been escalating its stakes in every possible direction since the first episode. In Season 1, the worst that could happen was Benson firing Mordecai and Rigby, and even that threat was never real, because without them, there would be no show. In Season 2, the supernatural elements got bigger. In Season 3, they got weirder. By Season 4, the premiere episode, Exit 9B, which aired on October 1st, 2012, featured a full-scale battle where every villain from every previous episode was resurrected through a dimensional portal by Garrett Bobby Ferguson Jr., the son of the giant floating head who held the arcade high score in Season 1. The park crew had to fight them all, alongside allies like Death, the god of basketball, and the Guardians of Eternal Youth. It was a 22-minute action movie disguised as a cartoon about groundskeepers. By the time the movie arrived in 2015, the show was dealing with time travel and the potential erasure of the entire timeline. Space, a continent inside shh. When it comes in Season 8, is just the next step on an escalation curve that has been climbing for 7 years. And the show knows this. It does not pretend that sending the park into orbit is a natural development. It treats it as what it is, the final chapter, the last and largest arena for these characters to inhabit before the story ends. But the space arc does something clever beneath the spectacle. It strips away everything familiar. No coffee shop, no Margaret, no CJ, no town to go home to, no routines to hide behind. Just the park, floating through the cosmos, and the people in it. Mordecai and Rigby are forced, for the first time in the entire series, to exist without the external support structures that have defined their adult lives. There is no place to slack off to, because everywhere is the park, and everywhere is space. There are no distractions, because the only things in their immediate world are each other, their coworkers, and whatever the universe is about to throw at them. In space, Mordecai and Rigby do something they have never done before. They take their jobs seriously. Not completely seriously, because they are still Mordecai and Rigby, and complete seriousness would be a betrayal of everything they are. But they engage. They participate. They contribute to the survival of the park crew with a willingness that would have been unthinkable in Season 1. The low gravity and the unfamiliar environment and the constant threat of the unknown force them out of the comfortable routines that have defined their lives for 7 seasons. They cannot default to the couch because the couch is floating. They cannot default to avoidance because there is nowhere to avoid to. Space, paradoxically, is what finally makes them present. The first episode of Season 8, One Space Day at a Time, which aired on September 26, 2016, establishes the new dynamic. The park crew has to figure out how to survive in an environment that was never designed for habitation. They have to ration food, manage resources, navigate conflicts in an enclosed space where you cannot walk away from the person who is annoying you. These are adult problems, real problems, not the kind that can be solved by a magic keyboard or a deal with death. And Mordecai and Rigby, for the first time in the series, rise to meet them. Not perfectly, not without complaining, but they rise, they show up, they do the work. And in doing so, they demonstrate that the 7 seasons of small, invisible growth have actually produced something functional. The kids who stole a keyboard are gone. In their place are 2 imperfect adults who can handle a crisis, who can support their friends, who can put the needs of the group above their own desire to do nothing. The space season also gives Mordecai and Rigby something they desperately need and have never had: perspective. When you are on Earth, in the park, in the routine, you cannot see the shape of your own life. You are too close to it. You are inside it. But in space, looking down at a planet that is getting smaller every day, you can see the distance between where you started and where you are. You can measure, for the first time, how far you have come. Mordecai, who entered the series as a guy who could not talk to a girl at a coffee shop, is now a person who has survived heartbreak and made peace with being alone. Rigby, who entered the series as a guy who could not face his own transcript, is now a high school graduate in a committed relationship. The space arc gives them the physical distance to appreciate these changes, and the show gives the audience the same distance, pulling back to a cosmic scale so that the personal growth becomes visible against the backdrop of infinity. What the universe throws at them is the truth about Pops. Pops Mylord, the lollipop man. The innocent, sheltered, endlessly kind resident of the park house, who has been saying good show and giving sugar to children since the pilot episode. The character you would least expect to be cosmically significant turns out to be the most cosmically significant character in the entire show. Pops and his twin brother, Anti-Pops, are not just people. They are cosmic entities, born on a planet called Lollyland, fated to fight each other every 14 billion years for the fate of the universe. Every time they fight, their equally matched powers cancel each other out and cause the universe to reset. Everything dies. Everything starts over. The cycle has been repeating for longer than time has a unit to measure. This revelation transforms the entire series retroactively. Every silly adventure, every supernatural escalation, every time Mordecai and Rigby accidentally summoned a demon or broke the fabric of reality by trying to avoid mowing a lawn, it was all happening in a universe that was always going to end. The stakes were never really about whether Mordecai and Rigby would get fired or whether the park would survive. The stakes were about whether anything any of them did mattered, in a cosmos that kept erasing itself and starting from scratch. The show had been, from the very beginning, a comedy about existential meaninglessness, dressed up in bright colors and 11-minute episodes. The park was always temporary. The friendship was always happening inside a countdown. But the show does not use this revelation to argue that nothing matters. It uses it to argue the opposite. If the universe is going to end, if everything you build is going to be erased, then the only thing that matters is the building itself, the act of showing up, the act of caring, the act of being someone's friend, even though you know, on some level, that it is all going to disappear. Mordecai and Rigby do not know about the cosmic cycle when they become friends in kindergarten. They do not know about it when they steal the keyboard, or when Rigby forges the letter, or when Mordecai fumbles through 3 relationships. They just live. They just keep going. And the show argues that the keeping going is the point. The finale, a regular epic final battle, aired on January 16th, 2017. It is a 3-part episode. The first 2 parts are titled Part 1 and Part 2, and they are preceded by a segment that shares a name with the first episode of the series, The Power. That naming is deliberate. The show is closing the circle. It started with a keyboard called The Power, and it ends with a battle over the power to decide whether the universe continues or resets. Anti-Pops arrives. He is everything Pops is not. Where Pops is gentle, Anti-Pops is violent. Where Pops is kind, Anti-Pops is cold. Where Pops sees the good in every person and every situation, Anti-Pops sees only the cycle, only the fight, only the predetermined ending that has played out the same way since before the first star ignited. He comes to the park, to this tiny patch of green in the middle of an infinite universe, and he begins to erase things. Characters disappear. The world dissolves at the edges. Reality itself becomes unstable in a way that is not funny anymore, not supernatural in the entertaining way the show usually handles it. This is entropy. This is the end. The park crew fights. Mordecai fights. Rigby fights. Skips fights. Benson, who has spent 8 seasons yelling at people about doing their jobs, picks up a weapon and fights alongside the employees he has been threatening to fire for 7 years. Muscle Man fights. High Five Ghost fights. They all fight, and they all lose. Over and over, they lose. The battle is not something you can punch your way out of. It is not something Skips can fix with his ancient knowledge, or Benson can manage with his clipboard. It is the end of everything. It is the final iteration of a cycle that has been running since before any of them existed. Pops breaks the cycle, and the way he breaks it is the most important narrative choice the show ever makes. He does not break it with a punch. He does not break it with a weapon, or a spell, or a cosmic power that he unlocks at the last moment. He breaks it with a hug. In the final confrontation, after every other strategy has failed, after strength and strategy and teamwork have proven insufficient, Against a force as old as the universe itself, Pops grabs Auntie Pops and flies them both toward the sun. He wraps his arms around his brother, the brother who wants to destroy everything, the brother who has fought him every 14 billion years since the beginning of time, and he holds him. He shows him kindness, not as a strategy, not as a last resort, as a genuine expression of who Pops is, who he has always been, the person who sees good in everyone and believes, against all evidence, that love is stronger than destruction. For a brief, impossible moment, Auntie Pops stops fighting. He remembers what it was like to not be angry. He remembers his brother. He remembers kindness. They reconcile, silently, in the space between words, in the seconds before the sun takes them both. And then, they are gone. Pops dies. Auntie Pops dies. The cycle breaks. The universe does not reset. Everything that was erased comes back. Everyone who was lost is restored. The park returns to Earth. Life continues. Except for Pops. Pops does not come back. The show handles his death with a restraint that is devastating precisely because of its understatement. There is no dramatic speech. There is no tearful goodbye scene. There is a statue of him in the park afterward. His friends stand around it. They remember him. They are sad, but they are also grateful, and they are also alive, which is the thing Pops died to ensure. The show does not linger. It does not milk the emotion. It states the fact, Pops is gone, and then it moves forward because that is what the living do. They mourn, and then they continue, carrying the weight of the loss and the gratitude for the sacrifice in equal measure. Mordecai and Rigby do not save the universe. That is the single most important narrative choice in the finale, and it is easy to overlook. In the end, after 8 seasons of escalating adventures, after 244 episodes of supernatural crises, resolved through effort and luck and friendship, the 2 main characters of the show are not the ones who make the sacrifice. They are not the heroes of the final battle. They are the witnesses. They are the people who survive. They are the ones who stand in the park afterward, looking at the statue, breathing air that exists because someone else gave up their life. The show is making a statement about what the story was always about. It was never about being heroes. Mordecai and Rigby were never going to save the world. They were never going to transcend their limitations and become something mythic. They were going to be present. They were going to show up, day after day, for each other and for the people around them. And that showing up was going to be enough. Not enough to prevent loss. Not enough to stop the cycle. But enough to make the universe worth saving in the first place. There is a detail about the way the show handles Pops' death that deserves attention, because it tells you everything about what regular show values as a piece of storytelling. When Pops dies, the show does not give him a final speech. There is no moment where he turns to the camera and tells you what he learned or what he hopes for the people he is leaving behind. He does not say goodbye. He just acts. He hugs his brother and he flies into the sun and he is gone. The show lets the action speak. It trusts the 7 years of characterization, the dozens of episodes where Pops said good show and offered sugar to strangers and believed in the goodness of the world with a conviction that bordered on naive, to give the sacrifice its weight. You do not need Pops to explain why he is doing it. You know why. You have been watching why for 244 episodes. He does it because he is Pops. He does it because kindness is not a strategy for him. It is an identity. And the show honors that identity by letting it be the last thing he expresses, in the last moment of his life, without commentary or justification. Compare this to how other animated series handle their most emotional moments. Many of them underline the emotion. They add a musical swell. They have a character verbalize what the audience is supposed to feel. Regular show refuses to do this. It presents the emotion raw, undecorated, and trusts you to feel it on your own. The restraint is what makes it devastating. If Pops had given a speech, you would have cried in the moment and moved on. Because Pops says nothing. Because the show says nothing. Because the silence after the sun takes him is absolute and unbroken. The feeling does not resolve. It stays with you. It sits in your chest like a stone. You carry it with you past the finale, past the credits, into the rest of your life. And every time you think about regular show, every time someone mentions the name, or you see a clip online, or you hear the theme music, that stone shifts slightly, and you feel it again. Not as sharply as the first time, but you feel it. The park crew stands around the statue of Pops after the battle. They do not have a memorial service. They do not give speeches. They just stand there. Benson stands there, the manager who yelled at everyone and cared about everything and kept the park running through 7 years of chaos. Skip stands there, the immortal who has buried more friends than anyone should have to bury, and who chose to keep caring anyway. Muscle Man stands there, the guy with the jokes, the guy who hides everything real behind a punchline, standing in front of a statue with nothing funny to say. High Five Ghost floats beside him, offering the only comfort he knows how to offer, which is presence. Mordecai and Rigby stand there. They have no special relationship with Pops. Not more special than anyone else's. They just liked him. They liked his kindness. They liked the way he said good show. They liked the way he made the park feel like a place where gentle people could exist alongside chaotic ones. And now he is gone, and the park is a little less gentle. And they stand in front of his statue, and they feel the weight of a loss they did not see coming. In a show that taught them to expect the extraordinary, but never quite prepared them for this. Pops does not fly into the sun for an abstract concept. He does not sacrifice himself for the universe as a philosophical entity. He sacrifices himself because his friends are in it. Because the park is in it. Because somewhere in that vast, doomed cosmos, there are two guys on a couch playing video games. And the fact that they exist, that their friendship exists, that their small and imperfect and beautiful bond exists, is worth dying for. The show does not say this explicitly. It does not need to. You feel it in the way the camera lingers on the park after the battle. You feel it in the silence. The finale does not end with Pops. It does not end with the battle, or the sacrifice, or the restoration of the universe. It ends 25 years later. There is a montage. It is set to the song Heroes by David Bowie, performed by a different artist. The montage shows what happens after the park returns to Earth, after the dust settles, after the characters step out of the crisis and back into normal life. And what happens is time. Time is what happens. The most mundane and the most powerful force in the universe, more powerful than any keyboard or demon or cosmic entity, does what it always does. It passes. Mordecai leaves the park. This is significant because the park has been his world for the entire series, his workplace, his home, his social universe, the physical space where every important relationship in his life has played out. Leaving the park is Mordecai leaving his 20s. It is Mordecai choosing, finally, to pursue the thing he always wanted and never had the discipline or the courage to commit to. He becomes an artist, not overnight, not in a montage-compatible burst of inspiration. Over years, the way careers happen. He paints. He shows his work. He meets a woman named Steph at one of his art shows. She is a bat. They fall in love. They get married. They have 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. He is happy. In the quiet way that people are happy when they have stopped performing happiness and started living it. Rigby stays closer to the orbit of his original life, but he fills it with things that matter. He and Eileen get married. They build a life together. They have 2 daughters. Their first real kiss, the one that counts, the one that happens with full intention and full awareness, occurs in the finale itself, on the ground, after the park has returned to Earth and the universe has been saved. It is the smallest possible romantic gesture embedded in the largest possible cosmic event. A raccoon kissing a mole while the sky is still settling from the near destruction of everything, and it is the most regular show moment in the entire series. The extraordinary and the ordinary occupying the same frame, each making the other more meaningful. 25 years later, there is a reunion at the park. All the old friends come back. They are older. They have families. Their children run around the grounds that used to be Mordecai and Rigby's workplace. Benson is there, presumably retired from the position he held with more dedication and frustration than anyone else could have managed. Skips is there, unchanged, because Skips is immortal, and change is something that happens to other people. Muscle Man is there, still loud, still himself. High Five Ghost floats nearby. The park has 2 statues now. One of Mr. Maillard, Pop's father, who passed away sometime in the intervening decades. One of Pop's himself, the Lollipop Man who saved the universe with a hug. The old friends gather around the statues. They take a group photograph. Families crowd into the frame, children and spouses, and the accumulated evidence of 25 years of living. It is the kind of photograph that exists in every family album. Slightly awkward, slightly chaotic, with someone always looking the wrong way, and someone else mid-blink. It is ordinary. It is perfect. And then Mordecai and Rigby step away from the group. They walk together across the park grounds, past the house, past the trees, toward a shed. The shed from the first season. The shed from the episode Just Set Up the Chairs, one of the earliest episodes, where the task was simple and the consequence of failure was Benson's anger. And the supernatural intervention was a pair of ancient video game machines that came to life. They open the shed door. They look inside. The video games are still there. That is the last beat of the show. 2 friends, decades older, decades wiser, decades removed from the people they were when they stole a keyboard and sent Skips to the moon, standing in a shed and looking at old video games. Not playing them. Not using them as a portal to some new adventure. Just looking. Just checking. Just confirming that the thing is still there. The way you check on something precious when you have been away for a long time. You do not need to use it. You just need to know it exists. The show ends on that image. 2 friends in a shed. Old machines humming in the background. A universe that almost ended, continuing. And the silence that follows. The silence after the credits. The silence that stretches between the end of regular show and the rest of your life is the show's final gift to you. It is space to sit with what you just experienced. Space to think about the people you met in kindergarten and the choices you made, and the letters you forged, and the romances you fumbled, and the things you let go of, and the things you could not let go of, and the sheds you still visit in your mind when you need to know that the old games are still there. You know what makes the ending of regular show different from most animated series finales? It does not end with the characters frozen in time. It does not preserve them in amber at their best or funniest or most iconic moment. It lets them get old. It lets them change. It lets them become people who do not need the park anymore, who do not need each other in the desperate, codependent, cannot function without you way they did in season 1. Mordecai does not need Rigby to feel complete. Rigby does not need Mordecai to feel safe. They have wives and children and careers and identities that exist independently of the friendship. They have become separate people, whole people, adults, and they still go to the shed. That is the thing. The friendship does not survive because they cling to it. It survives because they let it evolve. They go from being roommates who share a bunk bed to being middle-aged men who live in different houses in different neighborhoods with different families. The intensity fades. The codependence dissolves. The scorekeeping stops. What remains is something cleaner and stronger and more durable than what they had in season 1. What remains is two people who chose each other when they were 5 years old and kept choosing each other in different ways, at different intensities, through different phases of their lives, for decades. The choosing is the point, not the form it takes. The choosing. There is a detail about Regular Show that most people do not think about, but once you notice it, it reshapes the entire series. The show is called Regular Show. That is the title. Regular. And yet almost nothing that happens in it is regular. Every episode features some kind of supernatural escalation, some rupture in the fabric of normalcy, some moment where the ordinary tips into the extraordinary. The gap between the title and the content is not an accident. It is the thesis. What is regular about Regular Show is the friendship. The friendship is the constant. The friendship is the thing that does not change, even as everything else escalates from keyboards to cosmic battles to the heat of the sun. Every demon, every time portal, every sentient object, every apocalyptic threat, that is the noise. The signal, the thing that stays steady through 244 episodes and 7 years and 8 seasons, and one movie and one finale that almost ends the universe, is two guys on a couch. Not talking about anything important, not doing anything remarkable, just being together, just existing in the same space, at the same time, with the shared understanding that this is enough. This was always enough. Consider the structure of almost any episode. Mordecai and Rigby start with a mundane problem. They need to set up chairs for a party. They want to watch a movie. They have to mow a lawn. They need to return a library book. The problem is aggressively, defiantly ordinary. Then something goes wrong, usually because they try to take a shortcut or avoid the work, or because Rigby makes a decision that Mordecai goes along with, against his better judgment. And the ordinary problem becomes an extraordinary crisis. Monsters appear. Dimensions collapse. Time loops form. Reality itself becomes unstable in ways that would be terrifying if the show did not handle them with such casual warmth. And then, through some combination of effort, luck, teamwork, and the intervention of characters like Skips who have seen it all before, things go back to normal. The chairs get set up. The movie gets watched. The lawn gets mowed. The library book gets returned, sometimes. But here is what the show understands about that cycle. The thing that separates Regular Show from every other cartoon comedy that uses a similar episodic formula. The return to normal is not a reset. It looks like one. On the surface, everything is the same after the crisis as it was before. The park is intact. Benson is still their boss. The couch is still in the living room. The video games still work. But Mordecai and Rigby have been through something together. They have seen something together. They have survived something together. And even though they do not talk about it, even though the next episode starts as if nothing happened, the experience accumulates. It builds up in the margins of the show, in the way the characters interact, in the small shifts of trust and patience and tolerance that happen so gradually, so imperceptibly, that you do not notice them until you watch the whole series back and realize that the Mordecai and Rigby of Season 8 are not the same people as the Mordecai and Rigby of Season 1. They look the same. They sound the same. They still play video games and avoid work and annoy Benson. But they carry 7 years of shared experience in their posture, in their silences, in the things they do not need to say because they have already said them, in 1,000 different ways, through 1,000 different adventures that nobody else in the world can understand. That accumulation is the story. Not any single episode. Not any single arc. Not the romance with Margaret, or the breakup with CJ, or the forged letter, or the graduation, or the space battle, or the death of Pops. The story is the sediment. The slow, patient, invisible layering of shared experience that turns two irresponsible 23-year-old groundskeepers into two functional adults who can stand at the edge of the universe and not flinch, because they have already stood at the edge of everything together 100 times in 100 different ways, and they know that the standing is the thing that matters. Think about what Mordecai and Rigby go through together over the course of the show. Not the big moments, the small ones. The times they argued over whose turn it was to do a chore, and the argument somehow summoned a ghost. The times they played rock, paper, scissors, and the result determined the fate of the park. The times they sat on the steps of the house at the end of an episode, after the dust had settled, and the demon had been banished, and Benson had finished yelling, and they just sat there, together, in the quiet, not saying anything, not needing to. Those moments are the story. Those silences are the story. The friendship is built in the spaces between the spectacles, in the ordinary moments that the show titles itself after. Regular. The regular stuff. The stuff that does not make it into a highlight reel or a best of compilation. The stuff that you only notice if you watch all 244 episodes and pay attention to what happens when nothing is happening. Two friends, sitting on some steps, being alive, being together, being regular. There is something else the show does that almost nobody talks about, and it is perhaps the most radical thing Regular Show ever attempted. It tells a story about male friendship that is emotionally honest without ever making that honesty feel forced or performative. Mordecai and Rigby love each other. The show never uses that word, or almost never, but the love is evident in every frame. It is there in the way Mordecai forgives Rigby for the letter. It is there in the way Rigby stands beside Mordecai through every romantic failure. It is there in the way they choose, over and over, to be in the same room, to share the same space, to endure each other's worst qualities, because the alternative, being apart, is worse. Male friendships in animated television, and in popular culture more broadly, are often portrayed as either competitive or ironic. Men in stories are allowed to compete with each other. They are allowed to make jokes at each other's expense. They are allowed to bond over shared activities, sports or video games or work. What they are rarely allowed to do, especially in comedies, is be vulnerable with each other. They are rarely shown sitting in silence, being present, letting the other person's pain exist without trying to fix it or laugh it off. Regular Show does this constantly. When Rigby tells Mordecai about feeling overshadowed by Dawn, Mordecai does not make a joke. When Mordecai is heartbroken over Margaret, Rigby does not tell him to get over it. When they sit on the steps at the end of an episode, the show does not undercut the moment with a punchline. It lets the tenderness stand. It lets two male characters care about each other openly, without qualification, without the protective layer of irony that so much male-oriented comedy uses as a shield against genuine feeling. This matters more than it might seem. For a show that aired on Cartoon Network, primarily to a young audience, the message embedded in every episode was simple and quietly revolutionary. It is okay to need your friend. It is okay to be hurt by your friend. It is okay to forgive your friend and to be forgiven, and to sit together in the aftermath of something painful without saying a word. It is okay to love someone and not know how to say it, except by showing up again and again. For 7 years and 244 episodes and a trip to space and the end of the universe. The show never lectures about this. It never becomes a special episode about emotional health. It just models what honest friendship looks like, with all its complications and failures and silences, and trusts the audience to absorb it. And the audience did. The generation that grew up watching Mordecai and Rigby learned, without being told they were learning, that vulnerability is not weakness, that caring is not embarrassing, that the most courageous thing you can do is be honest about what you feel, even if the honesty makes you look soft, even if the honesty does not fit the script you were given about how people are supposed to behave. Regular Show existed in a specific moment in the history of animated television, and that context matters for understanding why its story landed the way it did. The show premiered in 2010, at the start of what many people now call the golden age of Cartoon Network. Adventure Time had premiered 4 months earlier, in April 2010. Steven Universe would arrive in 2013. These shows, taken together, represented a shift in what American animation could be. They could be funny and emotional. They could be episodic and serialized. They could be aimed at children and resonate with adults. They could be about magic swords and alien gems and talking dogs, and still, underneath all of that, be about growing up, about identity, about the painful, beautiful, confusing experience of becoming a person. Regular Show was the quietest member of that generation. It did not have the elaborate mythology of Adventure Time or the progressive themes of Steven Universe. It did not make headlines. It did not become a cultural flashpoint. It just aired, week after week, season after season, building its story in the background, while louder shows commanded the spotlight. And there is something appropriate about that. The show's entire thesis is that the quiet, steady, unremarkable things are the ones that matter most. Of course, its own cultural presence would reflect that thesis. Of course, it would be the show you had to look for, the show that rewarded patience and attention rather than demanding them. But if you did look, if you did pay attention, what you found was a show that understood friendship with more precision and more honesty than any of its flashier peers. Adventure Time told a beautiful story about Finn and Jake, but their friendship was defined by adventure, by the external world they moved through together. Regular Show told a different kind of friendship story. It told the story of two people whose friendship was defined by stasis, by the refusal to move, and then by the slow, reluctant, incredibly difficult process of moving anyway. That is a harder story to tell. It is less visually exciting. It generates fewer memorable action sequences. But it is the story that most people actually live. Most of us do not go on adventures with swords and monsters. Most of us sit on couches. Most of us resist change until change becomes unavoidable. And most of us, if we are lucky, have someone sitting next to us while we do it. J.G. Quintel made a show about two slackers who did not want to do their jobs. He started with a student film about two convenience store clerks, and he ended with a 3-part finale about the end of the universe. In between, across 244 episodes and 7 years and 8 seasons, he told the story of two people who learned, slowly and imperfectly, how to grow up without growing apart. That story does not have a single iconic moment that everyone remembers. It does not have a quote that went viral or a scene that defined a generation. It has, instead, 1,000 small moments that accumulate into something you feel in your chest when you think about it long enough. Something warm, something heavy, something that makes you want to call a friend you have not spoken to in years. Not to say anything important, just to hear their voice and know they are still there. You know what separates Regular Show from the dozens of other animated comedies that have attempted something similar? It is the willingness to let the ending be quiet. So many shows, when they reach their finale, reach for spectacle. They make the last episode the biggest episode. They raise the stakes to their absolute maximum, and then resolve them with an explosion of action and emotion that is designed to be the most memorable thing the show has ever done. Regular Show does raise the stakes. So, it does have the cosmic battle. It does have the sacrifice. But then it keeps going. Past the spectacle. Past the climax. Into the silence that comes after. The 25-year time jump is the bravest storytelling choice in the entire series. Because a time jump says something that most shows are not willing to say. It says that the story does not belong to the creators anymore. It says that these characters have lives that extend beyond the boundaries of the narrative, that they continued to exist and grow and change in the decades after the cameras stopped rolling. It gives Mordecai and Rigby a future, not a hypothetical future, not a vague sense that things will probably work out. A specific, detailed, visible future. Mordecai painting in a studio. Steph standing beside him at an art show. Their 3 children, Rigby and Eileen at their kitchen table. Their 2 daughters. These are not suggestions. They are facts. The show tells you with absolute certainty that these people are going to be okay. That certainty is a gift, not just to the characters, but to the audience. Because when you spend 7 years with fictional people, when you watch them fail and recover and fail again, and slowly become something better, you need to know that it meant something. You need to know that the growth was permanent, that the lessons stuck, that the person Mordecai became after he stopped dating and the person Rigby became after he got his diploma are real, lasting versions of themselves, not temporary states that will revert the moment the credits roll. The time jump gives you that. It says these people made it. They made it through the park, and the romance, and the forged letter, and the space battle, and the death of their friend. They made it to the other side. They are standing there right now, in some version of this story that continues beyond the frame. Older, and slower, and softer, and happier than they have any right to be, given what they went through. And then, 25 years later, they walk to the shed. And the shed is the show's way of saying that growing up does not mean leaving behind. You can be a 48-year-old artist with a wife and 3 children and still walk to a shed to check if the video games from your 20s are still there. You can be a responsible husband and father and still feel a pull toward the version of yourself that was irresponsible and young and full of a specific kind of joy that only comes from having no obligations and no plan and no idea what you're doing. The shed is not a regression. It is not a failure to grow up. It is the recognition that growth does not erase the past. It incorporates it. The person you were at 23 is still inside the person you are at 48. The games you played are still inside the shed. And sometimes, on a Saturday afternoon at a reunion in a park where you used to work, you walk over and open the door, just to feel the connection between who you were and who you are. Just to close the loop. Just to say, quietly, to yourself and to your oldest friend, we were here once and look at us now. Mordecai and Rigby open the door. The video games are there. The machines from Just Set Up the Chairs, one of the earliest episodes of the series. The machines that were just supposed to be set up for a party and instead became sentient and nearly destroyed the park. Those machines, still there, still humming, covered in 25 years of dust and still functional, the way old things sometimes are, more durable than anyone expected, built to last in a way that nothing in the modern world seems to be built. They look at the machines, they look at each other, and the show gives you the last shot. 2 friends in a doorway. Light from behind them falling into a dark shed. Old machines glowing in the dimness. A universe of shared experience compressed into a single frame. No words, no music, no dialogue, just the image. And the understanding transmitted through composition and silence, and 7 years of accumulated trust between the show and its audience that this is what it was all for. Not the battles, not the drama. This, the return, the going back, the standing in a doorway with your oldest friend and feeling the weight of everything you've been through together, and finding that the weight is not heavy. It is warm. It is the warmest thing you have ever felt. The show ends. The credits roll. And you sit there, in your room, in your bed, wherever you are listening to this, and you feel something you were not expecting to feel from a cartoon about 2 talking animals who worked at a park. You feel the specific ache of loving someone for a long time. The specific gratitude of having been loved in return. The specific understanding that the most important things in your life happened so quietly that you almost missed them. Almost. But not quite, because you were paying attention. And the games were still in the shed. The scene from the beginning of this essay. Season 8. Pops flying into the sun. Mordecai watching. The show never says out loud that the hardest part of loving someone is knowing when to let go. But you hear it anyway. In the silence between the notes. In the gap between what the show looks like and what it feels like. In the distance between a title that says regular and a story that is anything but. Letting go is what the entire story is about. Letting go of Margaret. Letting go of CJ. Letting go of the forged letter. Letting go of the college Mordecai could have attended. Letting go of the park. Letting go of Pops. Letting go of who you were at 23. And discovering, on the other side of all that letting go, that the one thing you were always allowed to keep was the friend who was standing next to you the whole time. The games were still in the shed. They were always going to be there. That is the only thing this story was ever trying to tell you. The things that matter do not go away just because the universe resets. They do not disappear just because you grow up and move away and build a different life. They wait. They sit in the shed, humming quietly, collecting dust, exactly where you left them. And all you have to do, when you are ready, is walk back and open the door. Mordecai and Rigby walked back. After 25 years and 244 episodes and the saving of the universe, they walked back. And the games were there. And they looked at each other with the whole weight of their history, compressed into a single glance. And nothing needed to be said. Everything had already been said, across 7 years and 8 seasons, in a language made of stolen keyboards and supernatural crises and forgiven betrayals and quiet afternoons on a couch. That is the entire story of Mordecai and Rigby. 2 friends, 1 park, a universe that kept ending, and a friendship that did not. If you found something worth carrying away from this, subscribing helps more than you would think. Thank you for staying. I will see you in the next one.